BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. And hello everybody, today is Wednesday, another Ripper Wednesday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? On Wednesdays this year I've been talking to you guys about Jack the Ripper, perhaps the world's most famous unsolved mystery. Before I say anything else, I would like to give a shout out to Joseph, who requested an episode on the September 17th letter, and that's what I'll be discussing here. Jack the Ripper was a serial killer that operated in England in 1888. Whatever happened before or after that is still part of the mystery. Not only was Jack the Ripper a serial killer, but a series of communications have been attributed to the killer. Most notably, we have the Dear Boss letter, the Saucy Jacky Postcard, most famously the From Hell letter, and also a message that was written on a building called the Goulston Street Graffito. But there is an unconfirmed letter that I haven't discussed before on the channel, and this is the September 17th letter, and there is an excellent write-up about this over on casebook.org. Casebook.org is a very reliable place for Jack the Ripper info, and I'm going to read that for you right now. But first I'm going to give you the precursor that the September 17th letter is quite different, because it is one where there is a discovery that was made years later, even 100 years later, as we're going to see. And the question that we're going to explore in this episode is it possible that Jack the Ripper actually started sending letters earlier than believed? Because September 17th of 1888, that is very early on into Jack the Ripper's crimes. I was about to say the Autumn of Terror, but September 17th, of course, would still be the summer. Jack the Ripper committed the first crime on August 31st of 1888 with the murder of Polly Nichols. The second crime was on September 8th with the murder of Annie Chapman. Then, is it possible that Jack the Ripper mailed a letter on September 17th? Let's look at the casebook.org write-up. September 17th, 1888. This letter was only recently discovered by Peter McClellan in a sealed report envelope in the British Public Record Office in 1988. Its authenticity is hotly debated, many believing it to be a recent hoax placed surreptitiously in the records. It was first published in Paul Feldman's book, Jack the Ripper, The Final Chapter. And even though you're going to see the text of the September 17th letter going by on the screen, it is very difficult to read from the photos and from the records, so I'm going to read the transcription here. September 17th, 1888. Dear Boss, so now they say I am a yid. When will they learn, dear old boss? You and me know the truth, don't we? Lust can look forever. He'll never find me, but I am right under his nose all the time. I watch them looking for me, and it gives me fits, ha. I love my work, and I shan't stop until I get buckled, and even then, watch out for your old pal Jackie. Catch me if you can, Jack the Ripper. Sorry about the blood, still messy from the last one. What a pretty necklace I gave her. And as I said, the question that we're going to be exploring is this an authentic Ripper communication? And I'm going to share with you guys my thought process when I first looked at this, and that is that I thought, wow, what a bunch of esoteric Jack the Ripper information, what a bunch of esoteric Jack the Ripper verbiage and wordplay, and these are things that are directly out of Jack the Ripper's other letters, such as the Dear Boss letter and the From Hell letter, and some of them that stood out immediately would be that it mentions Lusk, and Lusk is of course George Lusk, who was the chairman of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, and the From Hell letter was sent to George Lusk. Also, it begins with Dear Boss, and the Dear Boss letter came later on. That was mailed September 27th of 1888. The From Hell letter also says, catch me if you can. But interestingly, the From Hell letter does not say Jack the Ripper, but this one here says, catch me if you can, Jack the Ripper. And Jack the Ripper, of course, was mentioned on the Dear Boss letter. This one also uses the words, ha. The Dear Boss letter uses the words, ha. And they, this begins by saying, so they say I am a yid. And the Dear Boss letter concludes by saying, they say I'm a doctor. So, very, very similar writing styles and word plays. That was my immediate reaction. My second reaction was, that is extremely convenient. It's also as if somebody may have been looking at the text of the From Hell letter and the text of the Dear Boss letter, and then putting these two ideas together. As it says very clearly in that casebook.org write-up, the authenticity of this communication is hotly debated. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's exactly what happened. Somebody took some elements of the Dear Boss letter, somebody took some elements of the From Hell letter, and they created this as a fabrication. And the fact that this was found in 1888, I don't think is an accident. 1880. This was found in 1988. 1988, I don't think that was an accident, because 1988 was the 100th anniversary of the Whitechapel murders. And also, we had something interesting happen with the Dear Boss letter, and the Dear Boss letter was stolen from the police archives, and then it was returned anonymously in 1988, also most likely for the 100th anniversary. And I mean, that was actually a very big disservice to whoever handled it, because then they destroyed any possibility of obtaining forensic material. But they wouldn't have been aware of a lot of those things whenever it was stolen. Even in 1988, DNA was still in its infancy, and we really didn't have the DNA entering the courtrooms until the 1990s, or at the very least, in a widely discussed manner. But there is another website out there called Whitechapel Jack that I used to use in the past a lot. In 2021, when I did a series of Jack the Ripper videos, I relied on Whitechapel Jack as a source, but I haven't talked about it too much for the most recent Ripper Wednesday segments. And there is an excellent article over there called The Ripper Letters. And on this episode of Ripper Wednesday, I was hoping to do some comparisons and contrasts between the Ripper letters, particularly among the September 17th letter, and not only the From Hell letter and the Dear Boss letter, but also the Saucy Jacky Postcard and the Open Shaw letter. And I'm going to read the text of this one here. This is the Ripper letters from Whitechapel Jack. During the period of the Ripper murders, the media, police, and other officials received a sea of letters. The Whitechapel murders had created such a frenzy that many local citizens found it irresistible to not want to be part of this sensational investigation. Some of the letters were sent by concerned citizens offering their support in ongoing investigations, yet hundreds of letters were written by pranksters with the intent of taunting the police. Apart from a few well-intentioned letters from Whitechapel citizens hoping to aid the police in their efforts to apprehend Jack the Ripper, the bulk of these letters were crass, distasteful, or simply worthless. Several of the Ripper letters were written as it was by the killer himself. The vast majority of them, if not all, were believed to be hoaxes, yet there are 3 letters that stand out in particular. And before I say anything about the 3 letters that are widely discussed, the Dear Boss letter, the Saucy Jacky Postcard, and the From Hell letter, I should point out that they wouldn't have been discussing the September 17th letter at the time, because, as previously stated, this was found in a sealed envelope in the records in 1988, 100 years after the crimes, so they wouldn't have been debating its authenticity at the time, unless you're entertaining some wild theory that somebody had read it and then they just decided to reseal it, but that is making too many assumptions. Okay, so let's start with the Dear Boss letter, again from Whitechapel Jack. The Dear Boss letter, which was dated September 25th, was received by the Central News Agency on September 27th, the same day as its postmark. This letter was then sent to Scotland Yard 2 days later. Though initially viewed as a prank, the Dear Boss letter quickly gained attention after Catherine Eddowes' murder on September 30th. In the letter, the author made mention of clipping off the victim's next ears, and Catherine Eddowes was found with one earlobe severed. In the same manner as the other famed Ripper letters, the Dear Boss letter is rife with misspellings, as well as grammatical and punctuation errors. And it reads, Dear Boss, I keep on hearing that the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I have laughed when they look so clever and talk about being right on track. That joke about leather apron gave me real fits. I am down on whores and I shan't quit ripping them till I get buckled. Grand work the last job was. I gave the lady no time to squeal. How can they catch me now? I love my work and I want to start again. You will hear of me with my funny little games. I saved some of the proper red stuff in a ginger beer bottle over the last job to write with, but it went thick like glue, and I can't use it. Red ink is fit enough, I hope. Ha ha. The next job, I shall clip the ladies' ears off and send them to the police officers just for jolly. Wouldn't you? Keep this letter back till I do a bit more work, then give it straight out. My knife is so nice and sharp, I want to get to work right away if I get a chance. Good luck, yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Don't mind me giving the trade name. P.S. Wasn't good enough to post this before I got all the red ink off my hands, curse it. No luck yet. They say I'm a doctor now, ha ha. Now this one seems like it has a few blends from the September 17th letter. There are a few similarities in this one, and when it talks about being rife with misspellings, I should point out that there is the contraction in English, he will becomes hill, H-E apostrophe L-L. But in the September 17th letter, that is misspelled as hell, and Jack the Ripper would go on to send the from hell letter. And if I can give you my honest take on this one, I think that the laughter feels very consistent, like the ha-ha from the September 17th letter compared to the Dear Boss letter, but I do notice a difference in the tone and writing style between the September 17th and the Dear Boss letter, and that is that it appears that the Dear Boss letter is a little bit more articulate, and it's a little bit more organized, and the writer appears to be a little bit more intelligent, in my own unprofessional opinion, mind you. And before I say anything further, I would like to remind you guys that if you want to follow along with all of these episodes about Jack the Ripper, I put one out every Wednesday here on Black Box Online Radio, Ripper Wednesday, and you can hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And you can also go through some of the links in the description box. One of them is for buymeacoffee.com. Buymeacoffee.com/blackboxned88 allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show. And anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. And you can also use the super thanks and super chats. The super chats are for the live streams that come out on Tuesdays and Thursdays. For the Autumn of Terror, I'll be coming to you guys live at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tuesdays and Thursdays for True Crime Talk Radio in the morning. And this show is available for free downloads on Spotify. You can download the audio version as a pure podcast under the names Black Box Podcast or Black Box True Crime. And on the weekends, I release audiobook segments for something called the White Horse Killer Saga. It's a set of fiction that was inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, and the audiobooks come out on the weekends, usually Saturdays, and there is a playlist for that. I'm already on the fourth story now, called The Eyes of the White Horse. Lots of content here on Black Box Online Radio. Okay, so let's get back to the article from Whitechapel Jack. Soon after the Dear Boss letter was made public, hundreds more letters were received, claiming to be written by Jack the Ripper, all of them undoubtedly hoaxes. See, this is one thing, though, that we encounter in all of the true crime cases that I talk about in terms of the mysteries, like the Zodiac Killer, Jack the Ripper, D.B. Cooper. They do receive letters, and people suspect that they are hoaxes, but they may have received 1,000, 1,500 letters in Whitechapel. How do we know with certainty that they were all hoaxes? People might believe that, but the real killer could have sent things in that got mixed around, especially something like a September 17th letter, because this would be one that wasn't even being examined at the time. Maybe they didn't even think to open it. But most of them possess the same tone and catchphrases from the Dear Boss letter, and they were signed with the nickname Jack the Ripper. The Dear Boss letter, along with the Saucy Jacky Postcard, were published by the Metropolitan Police and handed out to citizens in hopes that someone would be able to identify the handwriting. Yet nothing came of it. Newspapers also reprinted the messages, creating a worldwide frenzy, a media frenzy, and increasing the celebrity of Jack the Ripper. Some sources claim that there was a previous letter which was dated on September 17th, you guessed it, in which the author referred to himself as Jack the Ripper. However, most experts discount that letter as a modern-day hoax, which was placed in police records during the 1900s, well after the murders. I mean, you have to be a little bit suspicious. If that letter has not been discovered until 1988, 100 years later. But, I mean, if that is a hoax, if the September 17th letter is a hoax, someone has put a lot of thought and effort into it, and they seem to be very familiar with a lot of the aspects of the Jack the Ripper case. Back to the article from Whitechapel Jack. While not publicized, police officials later stated that they believed the Dear Boss letter and Saucy Jacky Postcard to be the work of a local journalist by the name of Tom Bullen. Years later, in 1931, a journalist named Frederick Best reportedly confessed to writing the Dear Boss letter and the Saucy Jacky Postcard in an attempt to keep the business alive. It is not known if his claims were genuine, but it is probable. And when it means keep the business alive, Frederick Best worked for a newspaper called The Star. And in other sources that I've talked about, particularly in the 2021 episodes, it was described as he reported this statement, or he made this alleged confession to someone because he wanted to save the newspaper, The Star, to keep the business alive. That would mean his specific newspaper, as opposed to just making up wild stories to provide a little bit of context. But when I had the opportunity to interview Richard Jones of Jack the Ripper Tour, one thing he points out is that that is an alleged confession. It's not like we have a recording of Frederick Best actually saying this. So, I mean, it's just part of the mystery all the same. But the two leading suspects for writing the Dear Boss letter and the Saucy Jackie Postcard are Frederick Best and Tom Bullen. And I'll share some things at the end about the September 17th letter. Shortly after the investigation ended, the Dear Boss letter came up missing from police files. It is believed that one of the investigating officers in the Ripper case had it kept as a souvenir. In 1988, nearly a century later, the case had been closed, and it was returned to the Metropolitan Police by an anonymous party. And, I mean, while it's unfortunate that they can't extract any forensic material from that, there's going to be something much more important that I will share later on, and it could have been lost completely because of the bombings of World War II, and I'll get back to that, though. The next letter that was mailed that is widely discussed is the Saucy Jacky Postcard. The Central News Agency received the Saucy Jacky Postcard on October 1st of 1888, the same day as its postmark. The writer's handwriting on the postcard was very similar to the Dear Boss letter. The Saucy Jacky Postcard makes a mention of a double event, which was obviously in reference to the murders of Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, both of which occurred on the morning of September 30th, and it says, "I was not codding, dear old boss, when I gave you the tip. You'll hear about Saucy Jackie's work tomorrow. Double event this time." One squealed a bit. Couldn't finish straight off. Had not time to get ears off for police. Thanks for keeping the last letter back till I got to work again. Jack the Ripper. Okay, I've been over this a lot, so to be very brief, I think there's an extremely similar set of handwriting on the Saucy Jacky Postcard compared to the Dear Boss letter. However, I want to also share something with you guys. To those of you who follow these Ripper Wednesday segments, you will know that I think very highly of this theory that a journalist fabricated the Dear Boss letter and the Saucy Jacky Postcard. But let's just look at the time frame, right? Let's look at what happened. We have the August 31st murder of Polly Nichols. We have the September 8th murder of Annie Chapman. Then, allegedly, reportedly, to the best of our knowledge, there are no Ripper crimes until September 30th with the murders of Liz Stride and Catherine Eddowes. Yet the Dear Boss letter was written on September 25th, possibly, and received on September 27th. Okay, then, they had this letter. 3 days later, the killer acts again. If this were a hoaxer, how would he have known that the killer would act again so quickly? I mean, really, I think that that's very odd, because it could be a pure coincidence that, alright, well, Jack the Ripper was just waiting 3 weeks to commit his next murder for an unknown reason. Maybe the hoaxer was thinking that, alright, they haven't caught the killer yet. I expect that this person's a homicidal maniac. They're most likely going to commit another murder, and it's been, September 8th to September 25th. Alright, it seems like they are going to most likely commit another crime, not knowing when the killer would actually strike. And it was all just a coincidence that it happened 3 days later after that September 27th date, and then we have the double event. I mean, that's possible, but again, it's some very odd timing. Very odd timing. And I really don't want to be someone who just starts to overthink things, where I have some immediate instincts, immediate suspicions, which are shared by lots of people. You heard this Whitechapel Jack article very clearly. The author is saying that it's widely reported, discussed, and believed that all the letters are hoaxes. And I don't want to be someone who's just going down the rabbit hole and now rethinking everything in an impractical way. Another explanation could be that Jack the Ripper didn't mail the first letter on September 25th or 27th, and the September 17th letter was the first one, and I guess we'll just say that it's hotly debated. Now let's go on to the next one, and that's the From Hell letter. The From Hell letter is arguably the most disturbing and noteworthy of the three most prominent Jack the Ripper messages. This is mainly due to how the letter was received. Inside a small box accompanied by half a human kidney, coincidentally, Catherine Eddowes' killer had removed one of her kidneys. This letter is also distinct in that not only is the handwriting unique, but the writer also left it unsigned. The From Hell letter also appears to have been penned by someone with even less literary prowess than those responsible for the Dear Boss and Saucy Jacky Postcard. And of course, let's read the text of the From Hell letter. From Hell, Mr. Lusk, Sor, S-O-R, I sent you half a kidney I took from a woman, preserved it for you, the other piece I fried and ate, it was very nice. I may send you the bloody knife that took it, if you only wait a while longer. Signed, Catch me when you can, Mr. Lisk. And it actually says Mr. Lisk, M-I-S-H-T-E-R. Mr. Lusk, I guess, would be a better pronunciation. Maybe I was thinking of the Lisk, the Long Island serial killer. No, this was mailed to George Lusk, the chairman of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. I completely agree that this text appears to have come from someone who is either less educated, less intelligent, or seemingly trying to be less intelligent and less educated. Someone who is grading their language and intentionally distorting their language so that they don't come across as very intelligent. And out of all the letters that I've talked about so far in this episode, I would rank them in this order in terms of being articulate. Dear Boss and Saucy Jackie would be the most, the September 17th letter would be next, and then the From Hell letter. I think the From Hell letter is heavily distorting the language, and there's a little bit of that in the September 17th letter. And also the September 17th letter mentions George Lusk, as I said. So I think that there are similarities. And the thing that I wanted to come back to with you guys is that on a previous episode of Ripper Wednesday, I stated that, somebody asked a question about was the original From Hell letter preserved, as well as the kidney that belonged to, whomever that was mailed in, allegedly from Catherine Eddowes, but we don't know 100%. Well, were those items preserved? And I said no, and it had been my understanding that the kidney and the letter were destroyed in the bombings of World War II because the evidence room, or the records room that housed those specific pieces of evidence, took a direct hit during the bombings, and they were not saved. Lots of things were lost, but it appears that that's uncertain, and we're going to see why, because I'm going to go over to a different article from Jack the Ripper Tour that's going to discuss this. And it is going to talk about some of the other clues in the case as well as the pieces of evidence. And as we're going to see, there actually are a lot of hard pieces of evidence in the Jack the Ripper case. And one of them would be here, going to jacktherippertour.com, courtesy of Richard Jones. There was one clue of sorts. After the murder of Catherine Eddowes in Mitre Square, a blood-stained piece of a woman's apron was found in a common stairway to a block of flats in Goulston Street, a few streets northeast of Mitre Square. It was found to match exactly the apron Catherine Eddowes was wearing, and it had evidently been used by the killer to wipe his hands and knife. This piece of material suggested that the murderer was heading back to the East End, into the very heart of the murder district. While this strongly indicates that he was a resident there and member of the local community, he may have been forced into taking this route. Little is known of the investigation undertaken by the city police into the murder of Catherine Eddowes, the only Jack the Ripper victim murdered within their jurisdiction. Their files were destroyed by bombing during World War II. A brief account was given by Major Henry Smith, the commissioner of the police, in his memoirs, but they are considered unreliable. Okay, now that specifically states only the files. As far as the From Hell letter, there is another claim though that it may have even been stolen. It may have even been removed from the archives before the bombings of World War II. That, as you heard with the Dear Boss letter, one of the reasons why they think somebody took it is it was a souvenir. They thought it was of no longer evidentiary value, and with the From Hell letter, something similar might have happened as well. So that post specifically only refers to the files as opposed to the kidney in the letter. And if I can be very honest with you guys, I wouldn't be surprised at all if somebody had stolen the From Hell letter from the archives beforehand, or even if they had just quote-unquote borrowed it for their own personal reasons and they had been planning on returning it, or maybe they didn't. I mean, it seems like people did stuff like that, and it seems like the evidence in the Ripper case was extremely poorly handled. But, in conclusion, I would like to read the text of the September 17th letter one more time. September 17th, 1888. Dear Boss, so now they say I am a yid. When will they learn, dear old boss? You and me know the truth, don't we? Lust can look forever. Hell never find me. But I am right under his nose all the time. I watch them looking for me, and it gives me fits. Ha ha. I love my work and I shan't stop until I get buckled. And even then, watch out for your old pal Jackie. Catch me if you can. Jack the Ripper. Sorry about the blood, still messy from the last one. What a pretty necklace I gave her. Now I'm going to give you guys my ultimate final thoughts on this one. The first is, I'm usually on the skeptical side with these things, so when I heard that there was a letter that had been found in an envelope in the records in 1988, that made me believe that there's a high chance that it was a hoax. Now, if you think that the Dear Boss letter was fabricated by a journalist like Tom Bullen or Frederick Best, I think then almost certainly the September 17th letter would have been a hoax. I mean, how else would this person have known that a previous letter with Jack the Ripper had been written 8 to 10 days earlier? I mean, that would be nearly impossible unless they had some type of external information, and then that's just making assumptions, because Jack the Ripper is used on this letter as well. And I guess you could tell from the way I was talking about it in the beginning of the episode. To me, it seemed like this is somebody who was familiar with the text of the Dear Boss letter and the From Hell letter, and they used that as a particular set of influences to craft this letter as a hoax. Now, why would they choose to do something like that? Purely impractical. It's just impeding the investigations, and I wish people wouldn't do things like that if this is indeed a hoax, because this is obstruction of justice. That would be obstruction of justice. But here's an additional follow-up. Let's say, hypothetically, if you think the September 17th letter and the Dear Boss letter are written by the same person, why did this person write the postscript at the end? You know, Jack the Ripper, hope you don't mind if I give myself the trade name, or I can get the exact text there. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper, don't mind me giving the trade name. Why would somebody write that if that were the second communication, and they were already expecting that they were going to find a September 17th letter that had Jack the Ripper previously? Shouldn't that belong on the first communication? So if you think that the Dear Boss letter is authentic, you probably would lean toward the September 17th letter being a hoax. If you think that the Dear Boss letter is a hoax, then almost certainly the September 17th letter was a hoax, except for the possibility that some type of informant provided information, or it was opened previously and then put into the envelope and resealed in a different way. But you have to make an enormous amount of assumptions for that to work. My ultimate conclusion, either way, I think that this one is most likely not an authentic communication from the killer, but what do you guys think? And I should point out that I have standalone episodes on all of the letters that I have discussed, such as the Dear Boss letter, the Saucy Jacky Postcard, the From Hell letter, and I even have one on the Openshaw letter that was sent to Dr. Thomas Openshaw. So this is one that is going to exist as the standalone episode on the September 17th letter. If you guys want to check out some of those, I invite you to listen to some of them. I also have a couple Jack the Ripper playlists here And, if you have future ideas for episodes of Ripper Wednesday, as you see, this is one that was requested by one of the listeners. You can put them in the comments section down below. You can also send them to me at blackboxonlineradio@aol.com. And you can always get me on Facebook. My Facebook name is Ned DeHaan, and there is a Black Box Online Radio page on Facebook as well. On Instagram and TikTok, I am BlackboxNed88, and I will see you over there. Until next time.